Our colleagues, we have before us the Honorable Minister of Finance, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Minister of State, Finance, and Budget and Planning, the DG Budgets, the Permanent Secretaries. I think Accountant General here. Yeah. Accountant General of Federation. So, the procedure we want to adopt is very straightforward. The budget before us is very, very simple and straightforward. So, we will take the minister to give us an overview of the performance of the national budget. Thereafter, we listen to the DG budget, and then we might excuse the two of them if they want to go, because they have other pressing matters, I'm told. Thereafter, we will request the permanent secretaries, maybe Minister of State, of course, if you're, you will go with them because of your, sorry. The permanent secretaries, you wait and present the budget of your ministry. And then Accountant General, you also wait and present your budgets. Honorable colleagues, is that okay with us?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. However, before the minister goes, the members of the media or the general public will have to excuse us. We go into 5 minutes executive session, so that whatever we are supposed to let you know, we'll let you know, and then we come back and take the other agencies.
What I want to do is to present to you the performance of the 2022 budget parameters, as well as the performance of the 2022 budget implementation. And after my presentation, the Honorable Minister of State Budget and Planning will present the ministries and a global picture of the ministry and its agencies' summary of performance. I've circulated a document. We've given to the Secretariat. So there's a copy.
Which document are we?
This one.
Where is it?
We don't have that.
This one.
We don't have that. We don't have it.
It was given to the clerk of the
Clerk.
committee.
How far? Are you sure it's the same? No, it's not. It's not. It's not.
Is it different?
That is titled Overview of the 2022 Budget Implementation and Performance, a presentation to the Committee on Finance. And I'll move to slide number 4, which is presenting the performance of the 2022 budget parameters. Recall, honorable members, that you set the budget at 1.6 million barrels per day production for crude oil. Even in the adjusted, amended budget, the crude oil volume was held at the same 1.6 million barrels per day. But the actual performance, and this is as of July, is 1.26 million barrels per day. The oil price per barrel was appropriated at $73 per barrel. The actual price up to July is averaging $110.45 per barrel. The exchange rate was budgeted at 410 naira and 15 kobo. The actual as at end of July is 424 naira and 48 kobo. Inflation was projected at 16.11%, and as at July, inflation is at 20.77%. And this has since also changed. It has gone up now to 23% as the end of August. The GDP growth that was projected in the budget to be at 3.55% is near what is in the budget at 3.54%. This is half year June, not July. This is as of June 2022. At slide number 5, is just to further explain that even though the actual average crude oil price in the budget benchmark was $73, and the crude oil price in the global market was much higher than that, but we have not been able to benefit from this higher oil price, and because the higher oil price is offset in the case of Nigeria by low oil output, which as of July, this is not June, sorry, this is July, was averaging 1.26 million barrels per day. NNPC attributes the fall in oil production to the high incidence of crude oil theft and pipeline vandalization. Exchange rate inflation and growth numbers varied adversely from the targets. Growth is, however, expected to accelerate given efforts to contain structural issues that are impacting adversely on the cost of doing business in Nigeria. I'm moving on to slide number 7 to report on the revenue performance. So the revenue performance as at August 2022, federal government retained revenue was 4.23 trillion naira, representing 64% of the prorated target of 6.65 trillion. The federal government share of oil revenues was 395.06 billion, representing 27.1% performance, while the non-oil tax revenue collections totaled 1.549 trillion naira, and this is a performance of 102%. Company income tax and VAT collections were 826.7 billion and 210.36 billion, representing 136.3% and 99.6% of their prorated targets, respectively. The customs collection, comprising of import duties, excise and fees, and federation account special levies, trailed the target by 102.51%. This is to say that the performance of the customs collection was 83%. Other revenues amounting to 2.19 trillion, of which, so included in this is independent revenues, was 866.16 billion. At slide number 8, I'll be reporting on the aggregate expenditure for 2022. The 2022 budget was set at 17.32 trillion, with a prorated spending target of 11.55 trillion as at the end of August 2022. The actual spending as at 31st of August was 9.56 trillion. Of this amount, 3.52 trillion was for debt service, 2.89 trillion was for personnel costs, including pensions, 1.78 billion was released for capital expenditure. As slide number 9, we're reporting on the deficit performance. The fiscal deficit for 2022 was appropriated at 7.35 trillion. The 5.33 trillion deficit as at August is 430.82 billion above the prorated target. The level of borrowing is 1.26 trillion ahead of the July target. And this is to say that we were borrowing faster than what will have been prorated. And it was a conscious decision to make sure that we have funds early enough to release for implementation of capital projects. Honorable Chairman and honorable members, at slide number 11, the full implementation of the 2022 budget is challenged, particularly by oil revenues that are trailing target at 27.1% as at August, crude oil production challenges, and PMS subsidy deductions by the NNPC constitute a significant threat to the achievement of our revenue growth targets as seen in the oil and gas performance for 2022 as at August. Revenue generation remains the major fiscal constraint of the Federation. The systemic resource mobilization problem has been compounded by recent economic recessions. We have witnessed one during the first term of this administration at 2016 and the most recent one in 2020. But efforts have been mainly focused on improving tax administration and collection, and I must thank the finance committees of the Senate and the House for really helping us in this regard by closely monitoring the performance of the revenue collecting agencies. The Finance Act 2020 that pegged the revenue to expenditure ratio of the government-owned enterprises at 50-50 has helped us greatly in ramping up revenues from the government-owned enterprises. And the fact can be seen in the performance of the GOE's revenue of 1.3 trillion as at 2021. That's the first time that we've been able to achieve such targets. Recall that 3 years ago, the average performance was about 250 billion. We are maintaining efforts to continuously enhance not just tax administration and collection, but also tax compliance and the effort by the FRS to continuously expand the tax revenue. We are also putting efforts on improving non-oil taxes, and this is showing in the result of the performance of the non-oil targets, showing clearly that the non-oil revenues are performing below target, and in fact, the non-oil revenues are now over 70% of the revenue performance of our the federal government's budget. At slide 12, just to again restate that the overall fiscal risks for Nigeria as well as for most developing countries, but even for the developing countries in the current global environment is elevated. And then also it means performance might be weaker than projected because there are structural issues and also there are issues that are within the global environment that are also impacting the Nigerian economy. The goal of the fiscal interventions that government puts in place are to further stimulate the economy through carefully calibrated regulatory policy measures that are designed to boost domestic value addition, to de-risk enterprise environment, as well as to attract external investments and enhance our funding sources. We all must collectively continue to take very decisive and urgent action. And however, in exercising policy options, government will remain mindful of the need to provide safety nets to cushion the impact of the reform measures on the most vulnerable segments of the Nigerian population. Honorable members, this is our initial report. I thank you very much for the opportunity. With your permission, Chairman, honorable members, I don't know whether you want to have a discussion now or we invite the HMS to provide just a summary of the performance of the ministry itself and the agencies before the agencies come in to present a more detailed performance. How should we proceed?
Okay. The Minister has given an overview of the federal government budget itself and the performance. Mine is just to speak to that of our ministry and the agencies. In terms of, I'll be speaking to what the appropriation, the releases, and then the utilization so far. The total appropriation for the year was 22,235,944. This is for personnel costs, and this covers the ministry headquarters itself, the Debt Management Office, Budget Office of the Federation, Investment and Securities Tribunal, Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Pension Transitional Arrangement Department Headquarters, Center for Management Development, National Bureau of Statistics, and the Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research. In terms of overhead, the appropriation was 6,544,869,022 naira. And then the capital allocation was 20,233,200,806. Of this amount appropriated for personnel costs, 16,902,810,199 was released, representing 77% of the budget. While for the overhead expense, there was a release of 4,171,899,953 naira. This again represents 64% of the appropriation. For capital, the total sum of 11,278,782,991 million was released, and this represents 54% of the appropriation. In terms of utilization, on the personnel cost side, there has been 100% utilization, and the amount is 16,888,372,626 naira. While for the overhead side of things, utilization is 88%, representing that's 3,650,735,548. On the capital side, we have utilized 6,279,648,700 naira. This represents 56% of the capital that has been released. That's a synopsis of our performance so far in the ministry. Thank you very much.
Of finance, on the revenue aspect, that's revenue performance. I need more explanation on the custom collections. As at September, Nigeria Customs Service had generated 2.1 trillion. So I don't understand details that I'm seeing here. I saw 102.51 billion, 17%. Can you please clarify very well?
Collection, the low performance there. And I want to ask her what is responsible for this poor performance of custom collection, and what's our office doing to address the situation? That's number one. Number two, we have noticed very recently that most of our Greek produce has been exported through foreign ports, particularly Ghana. And I want to ask what's responsible for this, exportation going through foreign ports than our own ports? What's the attraction over there? And what are you doing to make our own ports equally attractive to exporters of our Greek produce? Thank you, Mr. Honorable.
I wish to align myself with the previous speakers, my colleagues, to comment on the federal government independent revenue. Honorable Minister, a lot of financial analysts over time has stressed the need for the federal government to deploy a kind of sub-treasury single account for the collection of this federal government independent revenue. But I don't know why is it becoming difficult on the side of the government, in particular the ministry, to deploy a kind of that system. If you look at the performance in 2022, it is still reading below the projection. What I can see here is 2.6 trillion, but the performance is 1.744 trillion. So what is the challenge in deploying a kind of soft treasury single account for the collection of these revenues? Thank you.
Inflation, which affects all Nigerians, currently stands at 23% according to your figure. So what's the plan of government? What are we doing to redeem the present situation we find ourselves? What exactly are we doing? Of taking 50% of IGR by agencies, are we following it up, or is still haphazard, or how many of those agencies are responding, or we are deducting those 50%? Thank you.
The guy doesn't know what she's talking about.
And you find agencies spending out of those, their own, going outside their limits, according to the Act. It's interesting. How do they have access to it? Because is there no proper monitoring? Although this Accountant General, we will take you up when that, but before the minister goes, we want her to be aware. We have agencies who spend as much as 2 billion outside appropriation. And this, to me, is not helping matters.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you very much. Maybe the first question is on the 2.12 trillion collected by NCS as of September. I don't know if I got this question right, but the Nigerian Customs, what we are reporting is that their performance is actually 83%, so we're just saying is 102%, which is 17% below the prorated target for the period. So maybe we should have just reported the actual and then the shortfall. So I guess that method that we took has caused some confusion. And then also the total collections of NCS is a federation collection. So the component that is due for the federal government is what we're reporting on here. We're not reporting on the total federation collection. Recall that at FAC, the federation share is what comes to the federal government CRF. So that's what we're reporting here, not the federation performance. But if you want to have also the federation performance, we can also compile that information on federation account performance and provide it, not just for the Nigerian Customs, but for all the revenue streams as well. The question as to why, I want to just say maybe this is saying why are our ports not attractive? It's a very big problem. Our ports are congested, and the unfortunate reality is a lot of importers prefer to go to our neighbors. But it has, what measures are we taking? From the Ministry of Finance, we have we have bought some very large scanners that are now in place in 3 locations. Our assessment is that will help to fasten the clearing process and decongest, contribute in decongesting the ports. But also the port authorities are on their own also trying to reorganize the ports to attain better efficiency, including control of the entries and exit to the port. The rail line from Lagos to Abuja is also being extended within Lagos to the Apapa port, so that containers can be, even before inspection, can be taken out of the Apapa ports to some other locations for inspections to be done. We believe a combination of these efforts will improve the efficiency of our ports and should result in Nigeria being able to attract its own business and perhaps even businesses of our neighbors into the ports in Nigeria. On the question of the independent revenue and the deployment of single treasury account, the single treasury account has been deployed to all government agencies. There is no agency of government that is having accounts outside of the treasury. If you will, maybe the Accountant General will provide more information on that. Or maybe I didn't understand the question, but I believe what I heard is the deployment of the single treasury account, which is implemented. But if I don't understand it, perhaps the Honorable can repeat the question.
Honorable Minister,
yes.
The TSA, I think, is meant for expenditure. That's the GMACE system, right? We're talking about the revenue companies for the collection of independent revenue.
The TSA, okay. The TSA has both revenue and expenditure accounts. The GMACE is the payment platform, is the payment platform, but the TSA has both revenue and expenditure accounts. And it has helped a great deal in terms of visibility of transactions as well as liquidity management. And the question on the matter of inflation, a very, very serious situation where Nigeria's inflation is now 23%. The inflation in Nigeria has a number of components. One of them is imported inflation, and what I mean by that is all currencies in other countries of the world, especially the developed countries, also affects Nigeria. For example, the war in Ukraine and Russia has an impact on Nigeria in the sense that some of the inputs for our food production are affected. Also, the decisions of central banks in the US and Europe, the decisions that they take on tightening, monetary tightening, has also an impact on their own levels of inflation that also affects our countries because we also import goods from those countries. But in Nigeria, we also have inflation. One of the buckets of inflation is food inflation. And because of the high cost of energy, diesel in our case, we find this showing up in food prices. So food prices are going up because energy, or let me be more specific, diesel prices are high. So when farmers produce their goods and they have to transport the goods to the market, their goods, the prices, the NBS data shows that food prices at farm gates have actually declined, but the cost of transportation is continuously increasing and impacting the cost of food and unfortunately affecting our people. What we are doing from the monetary side, what the central bank is doing, is continuing to manage inflation by monetary tightening, by mopping up liquidity. That's why the MPR keeps being adjusted. On the side of the government, the President has authorized the National Food Security Council, and we have held a meeting even yesterday evening on how some support will be provided. And one of the means will be releasing stocks from the strategic reserves, but also looking at how to provide some support in terms of inputs in fertilizer production as well as inputs such as feeds. The committee will be meeting again in the next couple of days to provide recommendations to Mr. President that will later on be announced for implementation. On the policy of the IGR, so the 50 ratio of revenue to expenditure, we are continuing to deduct in line with the Finance Act 2020, but also even in line with the previous approval that we got before the Finance Act. So the Office of the Accountant General can report also on what we're doing with those deductions, and it's actually helping a great deal. That is why we're able to continuously being able to manage, because the revenues are being realized from the non-oil sector as well as from the government-owned enterprises, despite the poor performance of the oil and gas sector. Agencies, there was a question about agencies spending out of appropriation. I would like to say I would want to have some more information so that we can look at this ourselves and be able to work together with our committee on how best to address and manage this. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members.